Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. These are the words that are at the beginning of the recent revisions to the bylaws, the Unitarian Universalist Association, that were finalized and approved at our General Assembly last year. When I first read it, I felt excited and energized. On paper, it is a powerful, dynamic, and affirming statement with which few could find fault or argument. How can you not get behind a mission statement that says in its first few opening words that love is the guiding principle and force behind everything we do? Who is going to argue with being guided by love in the world? And not only is it saying that love is at the center of everything that we do in terms of our values, but it adds an active component to it. It is not just the shared values, but how we are being called to live. The more that I read over the statement and the more that I thought about it, the more questions that began to slowly creep into my mind. How are we ultimately defining love? Whose definition are we using? And more importantly, what is being used to hold us accountable for living these shared values that we profess? Who and how are we determining whether the spiritual discipline of love is truly present and at work? In an attempt to help address and contextualize many of these questions, a series of short theological reflections on each of the values in the Article 2 revisions was put forth by the Reverend Dr. Sherry Prudhomme, Associate Professor of Religion and Education at Starr King School for the Ministry, just up the road in Berkeley, California. Over the next few Sundays, I will be revisiting these short reflections and hoping to engage in a dialogue with them about what these words truly mean, aka that Inigo Montoya school of preaching in which your minister has been well trained. And most importantly, how do these words help us in truly applying them in order to better live out this faith or these shared values? Facts. In her opening theological reflection on love, Reverend Dr. Prudhomme traces love back to our Universalist forebears of the late 18th and early 19th century, and their part in the great Universalist heresy that threatened evangelical and Calvinist churches in New England. This idea, one that had been present in Christianity since the days of the early church, is that God loved humanity so much that it did not make sense that people would be separated after death into those who would be saved or go to be in heaven with God, and those who would be damned or suffer a life of eternal torment separated from God. Their belief was that if God truly loved humanity, God would work to save everyone, not just certain people based on some mystical criteria. Since this universal salvation was found through the love of God for humanity, the Universalists sought to model this love in the world through their interactions with people in their daily lives. A similar vein of thinking was also developing independently among Unitarians in 19th century New England at the same time. An early example of how the two faith traditions were more alike than they were different, the recognition of which would ultimately lead to the merger of the two churches in 1961. For Unitarians, the ultimate goal was growing the soul toward the likeness of God, whom they also understood as loving. Instead of removing themselves from the world and living quiet interior lives of prayer and contemplation, as was considered to be the goal of 19th century religious life, they were to be out in the world going about the tasks of their daily living, but also unfold the divine likeness or demonstrate the love for humanity in the same way as they saw God showing love for humanity. Both of these historical examples serve to illustrate the fact that love for others has always been deeply at the center of everything that we do as Unitarian Universalists. Reverend Dr. Prudhomme closes her reflection with an aspirational and visionary statement about what this love that we profess has the power to do. We affirm the power of love to heal what is broken, to hold us together across pluralities of diverse religious practices and beliefs, to hold us when things fall apart, to grow our capacities, and to guide us as we return again and again to our families and communities to side with love. But this still leads me to wonder, what does this love look like? I'm reminded of American author and Baptist minister Gary Chapman, who became a household name because of a 1992 book that he wrote entitled The 5 Love Languages: How to Express Heartfelt Commitment to Your Mate. I will not spend too much time on this book, mainly because a quick Google search will show you how much it has been read, discussed, and dissected to death. But the basic thesis that Chapman puts forth is that through his experience as a pastoral counselor for married couples, people express and receive love through one of 5 languages: words of affirmation, spending quality time, giving and receiving gifts, performing acts of service, and physical touch. Chapman has since gone on to adapt this concept to a myriad of different situations and circumstances, but the idea is each person will usually speak one primary love language. And if we are able to understand how to speak to each person in their primary love language, the more that we can guarantee that a person can sense and feel love through our actions. Yet as wonderful as this sounds, it is simply impractical. How are we supposed to determine and diagnose, in what are often split-second interactions with people on a daily basis, the ways in which they best receive love? I struggled with this until I came across Paula Gordon-Lepp's poem that served as the reading for today and was presented with a true visual picture of what this looks like. What struck me the most about communion at the BP was how much the events of the poem truly reflect the most mundane of occurrences that we have in our daily lives. I will not ask for a show of hands, but how many of us, when you first heard the poem and the experience of being out in the sun in the parking lot of a gas station, trying to figure out the motor skills needed to navigate the air pump to try and put air in your tires, and did not think to yourself, "Yup, I've been there"? But I'm curious to know how many of you heard yourself in the second stanza of the poem. "Oh, that's okay, I've got it," is what I normally say to such overtures. This knee-jerk reaction to refuse. I know that I myself have said almost these exact words to someone that has offered to give me help when it seems like I am struggling to do something. Even worse, I heard myself loud and clear in the last 2 lines of the second stanza. I am the one who offers help. I am the one who serves. I would like to believe that this is less the sin of pride and more that we are just well-intentioned folks who are overeager to help out sometimes. But the truth is that as much as we may be good at being there to help out others, we are equally as bad as asking for help or allowing others to help us, even if it is painfully obvious that we need help. Lepp's narrator mimicked the same thought process that my mind went through when I read the poem. How many times have I denied someone the blessing of serving because I have been too stubborn to accept the gift? It is easy to be the hero, the one who rides in on the white horse to help people out when they need it. And it is instant gratification and instant dopamine. We as humans like to feel good, and so we keep doing it. Being on the receiving end is more challenging because that requires emotional vulnerability. It means making a choice to admit that you need help and allowing someone to help you. That can be harder to feel good about, and it does not come with the instant gratification of dopamine. But I try and think about it this way. If we are truly accountable to one another to live our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love, am I denying someone the opportunity to live out those shared values by not being vulnerable and allow myself to receive the help that I honestly need? Am I denying someone the opportunity to practice the spiritual discipline of love for themselves through performing an act of service? What would happen if I stopped for a moment and chose to be vulnerable and allowed someone to offer the spiritual discipline of love through their action? Obviously, there's more nuance to these questions, and the answers are not always that simple. There are many different ways that we as humans prefer and choose to give and receive love in this world. Maybe those love languages are compatible with ours, and maybe sometimes they are not. But perhaps taking a moment to appreciate when someone is going out of their way to offer an act of service, like the gentleman in Paula Gordon-Lepp's poem, to someone who appears to need help, deserves a little bit of our vulnerability. It also helps to ensure that this spiritual discipline of love that we profess can be realized and put into practice. And if it helps to foster true human connection and bring humanity together, I cannot help but think that it is a positive step in the right direction. May it ever continue to be so. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Thank you all so much.